Hello, everybody. Welcome to .NET Aspire Developer Days.
Yes, so excited.
Yeah.
This is going to be a lot of fun. We have a full day of live stream talks coming
Yep.
from all over the world at whatever time it is for you.
Indeed, or in the future, if you're watching this after the event. We have a bunch of fantastic speakers today. Sanderson, in particular, I know is coming up straight after us, talking about generative AI and Aspire. So you definitely should catch that if you're interested in the current hype.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's very nice. It's a great talk. I have seen a sneak peek of all of his demos before. They're great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't know of Steve Sanderson, he's the
Yeah,
Steve Sanderson.
I've yet to actually see him ever make a mistake live on stream. So if he does, and you all see it, you best let me know, because I'm yet to see him even make a typo when he's live coding on stage. It's amazing. A machine.
I thought I was going to get strangled last night while you were watching me try to type. So
indeed.
Yeah, well, welcome to the opening session.
Yeah.
I'm Maddy, Montaquila. This is Glen.
Glen. Yep, I am a PM lead on the .NET Aspire team, on the .NET team, but on the Aspire team
Glen
for this instance.
Indeed.
And
I'm a PM on .NET in general, a lot on Maui, and now coming more into Aspire, mostly because the first time I saw the Aspire demo, way back before .NET 8, I was so angry because I had no idea what anybody was talking about. I could not understand it.
Yeah.
And I made it my own personal vendetta, basically, to make people on Aspire teach me what on earth this is and how it's helpful for me as a mobile developer and someone who's done web development, but really not in the past couple of years. And so what we thought for this talk would be cool is kind of try and take the last couple months of what Glen and the rest of the Aspire team have been bestowing upon me with knowledge and try and condense it into an hour.
Yeah.
And hopefully for those of you who are newer to, what a distributed application is or microservices or whatever, this will be really helpful. And then for those of you who are really familiar with that stuff, this is going to be a great introduction to how Aspire is going to make your life easy doing all those things.
Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. This is the one-liner that I've been going with for Aspire. The building blocks for cloud development. Because to me, what it seems like is a bunch of things that I can plug in wherever I need them. And then they make my life easier.
Yeah, that was certainly the goal. Like when we did all of our first wave of kind of announcements, or if you saw any of the GA talks that we did or anything like that, we were saying words like opinionated stack, right? And ultimately, all we meant by that was we've decided to put together a bunch of pieces for you because we think they're valuable and we think that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but also you can just use bits and pieces of this to make your life easy. You need some resiliency, go free to use this bit. You just want some orchestration, cool. You want to do some deployment, figure it. You can mix and match the parts of Aspire, especially if you're in kind of an existing application. And we wanted to try and convey that as well as what we were trying to make easy. And that was definitely the genesis.
Right. Yeah. Aspire does a lot of stuff. And also, .NET 8, I think the first time we talked about Aspire publicly was at .NET 8. Glen actually talked about it with David Fowler. Yeah. One of the many people who have put a lot of work into Aspire. And .NET 8 had a bunch of things to help with those scalability, resiliency, all of that. Yeah. But they're all separate.
Yeah,
right?
I think the way that I try to think about this is .NET is always getting better, and because all of you are building more and more cloud applications, then it got a lot better for building cloud applications. Maybe, and now when people are starting to build AI apps, generative AI, you're going to start seeing more AI stuff. The stack continuously evolves based upon the things that you all are doing as developers who are using our thing. And so .NET 8 is yet another step in that journey, and there was a lot more just general goodness that you get just by upgrading to .NET 8, all of the extra telemetry and, for example, and logging and diagnostics and metrics and stuff, more performance, more kind of options for AOT to tune your kind of density versus memory versus things like that. But what we were thinking about with Aspire was all of this stuff is goodness and you get it regardless as soon as you upgrade to 8, but we needed to do more in order to be able to make building cloud applications easier. Just this on its own wasn't enough. We needed more, and that's why we went into Aspire, which was the idea that we could build a thing that took this and incorporated a lot of other things that historically we wouldn't incorporate in order to give you a set of blocks to be able to build great cloud applications.
Yeah. And so for me, coming in as someone who, in terms of cloud applications, I've only worked on things that already have an infrastructure, right? So at Microsoft and with something like Maddy, we have all of our CI/CD and all the things that need to be hosted. Someone set that up already. So for me coming in to do a web app or to jump into an existing web app, such as eShop for the first time, right? I did not realize the can of worms I was getting into.
Yeah.
And so eShop is a sample app. It's there on the .NET GitHub or Microsoft GitHub. There's a link. We'll put it in the show notes. But for me, like a web app starts with just the UI and the data. And this is usually where I stop with my web development,
Right.
which you'll see when we get into my code.
Yeah.
You know, I make an endpoint, and you hit that endpoint, and that endpoint has something hard coded in it, and then I serve that endpoint somewhere, and that's cool. You now have data. But that's not the reality of things, right? Like this gets really complicated really quick, even just for things like scalability in terms of like the specific API. And so the example that I always use and that I hear a lot of people use is you don't want your payment to fall over on Black Friday. When people are checking out in the basket, all that, or when you're trying to get your hands on a GPU or whatever it is, like certain things are going to have a lot more demand than others, such as like identity, where you would log in once. So, yeah.
Yeah. But then also as you start to add, so what you're saying here is what is conceptually simple then starts to get far more complicated once you try and deal with the real world. And then it gets even more complicated once you try and achieve like high levels of scalability, high levels of reliability, all of those sorts of things. Fault tolerance, resilience to errors going down. You want to make sure nobody gets paged in the weekend, all of these things. You also then need to think about how are you going to achieve developer velocity so you can ship features fast enough or get bug fixes out fast enough. And the real world is messy and complicated, and therefore your applications also get very messy and complicated. And the cloud in particular, there's a couple of quotes that were customer quotes, were people who were building .NET apps, like .NET developers out there, and that said things that resonated with us a lot as we were leading into starting to work on this thing that eventually became Aspire. And one of them was that just nothing works together by default. Like the world is now filled with 1,000 pieces, and it's like a full-time job just gluing components together in order to be able to build my application together. And I don't know if they're supposed to work together, and it keeps me up at night that I've accidentally stitched the wrong two things together and they're eventually going to fall over and I won't know.
Yep. I spent about 4.5 minutes trying to put a Maddy app in eShop and to spin up eShop just to run the whole thing at first, right? And this is before Aspire was in it. This was like before .NET 8 had shipped, and I just saw the eShop repo for the first time. And I was like, I don't even know where to begin with the things I do not know about. Right. And what I've learned is like, an average kind of cloud full stack developer is going to have to learn a lot of different things. And in some cases, people have the expert on that. Like the old, wizened person who knows how all of the caching stuff works in your specific system. And so for people to come in or try to move from on-prem to the cloud or to try and microservicize their app, if you will, there's a lot of things you have to just pick up and learn. And all of them have their own opinions and they don't work together.
Right.
And then you have the, like Glen mentioned with onboarding, right? Like I come in or I get a new laptop or I brick my Windows machine or whatever it is. And I have to set everything back up and I have to get all the tooling. And then I have to get everything working individually. Or if they're staged, I need to figure out where they're staged and authenticate to the staging environments. And then hopefully just connect them all locally, maybe.
Yeah. And so we're not going to ever make it so you don't have to learn anything.
Right.
But it shouldn't be as hard as it is today. It should be a lot easier for you to get a reliable set of things that you can use that you're reasonably confident are going to work together and that are going to do the right thing and are kind of made for purpose as well, and that ease a lot of the really common problems and reduce some of the boilerplate. Ultimately, that's what we're going for with Aspire. Yeah. Make it easier to get up and get started, make it easier to learn kind of more linearly as well, as opposed to cliff-like. Yeah. If you think of charting how much you learn on a graph, right? At the moment, there's a really steep cliff at the moment, and we really
Yeah.
want to turn that into a much more linear line so that you can learn naturally as you go.
Yeah.
And then this onboarding point, some of our earliest adopters of Aspire have given us, numbers like onboarding times that went from days to hours.
Yeah.
As they adopted Aspire. So we're pretty happy with that. We weren't explicitly going into the thing designing for onboarding, but then we realized as we solved like more and more annoying pains, they also solved onboarding time because it turns out they were the things that were causing onboarding to be slow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool because, sometimes you have apps where you touch them and they just break.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've heard that from a lot of people. And Aspire has really helped me be able to go and like try things out without getting myself into a completely unfixable state. And so there's a lot of stuff it does. We'll talk about all these things. There's going to be more talks throughout the whole day on all of these. We have some folks from the team. We have some folks from the community.
Yeah.
So really good variety, and it'll all be uploaded on YouTube after.
Yep. Yeah, I think there should be several There should be several different kind of what is Aspire iterations, so that one of them will land, hopefully.
Yeah.
And there should be lots of different explorations going deeper into different parts that you'll be able to learn from, and should be a really good day of content.
Yeah. But what we're gonna do for this? Oh, this is my marketing slide. Sorry. Aspire's open source, by the way.
It is.
Mention that.
We didn't.
And that's awesome because we'll actually talk at the end about some community stuff that is coming to a Aspire near you. But .NET, Visual Studio Code, whatever editor or IDE you want to use that supports .NET, C# for your app topology. We'll talk about that. And then a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's just .NET, right?
Indeed.
So it should feel really familiar to you as a .NET developer.
Should do.
And if you're not a .NET developer, it will help you out too.
We think. Yeah.
Varying a little bit, but that's fine.
Yeah.
So let's see what we have going on here.
Let's show me your code. You've been building an app yesterday and all over the weekend or something, right?
Oh, sorry, I just shared the wrong screen.
Yeah.
Live streams.
Nice.
I have been working on this app called Plant Lady.
Okay. Are you a plant lady?
I am a plant lady. Well, I'm an aspiring plant lady.
Oh,
So good. That's actually the first time I made that joke. That's horrible.
Yeah.
And so I have just a front end and a back end. And in my back end, I have this, let me just turn on my Zoom it. I have this hard-coded plants.json file because database, we'll get there one day. But to start this right now, right, this is a non-Aspire-fied project. What I do is I actually like to have a separate terminal open where I .NET run my API. Because I like that just not touching Visual Studio generally.
So you're just spinning up the one project with no debugger just outside of your thing.
Just outside. And it's probably going to take a few seconds, and it doesn't even matter because it's part of the demo. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And in here, I have a port set, an HTTP port for 5051.
Okay, so your API is always on port 5051.
Yep, and it is not HTTPS because I tried to do that and everything threw up on me on Visual Studio. And I said, never mind, no security it is.
Okay.
So that should be up, yeah. And so if I went here and I went around, like I have Swagger and all that so I can explore, but I'm going to have my front end as my startup project, and I'm going to run this one in Visual Studio under the debugger.
But now what if there's a bug in the API and you need to debug that? You have to invert this whole thing?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I have actually spent more time debugging via Swagger than via my actual UI, which I think is pretty funny.
And you live like this?
I do live like this.
Okay.
Okay. Nice.
Okay, you've got your app. Okay, there's plants.
Yeah, there's some plants. You see?
Yeah.
As you can tell, they're hard-coded because I have the same picture for the snake plant because I was too lazy to download it.
I was just thinking if that was actually a snake plant.
No, that's a jade plant.
Okay, good.
I do like thrives in darkness. This is the thing I'm the proudest of. My little things here.
Nice.
But
they thrive everywhere, snake plants. Right?
They do. Yeah. They're in mint. Anyways, this is it. And all it's doing is hitting an endpoint. And then, if I kill this endpoint.
And then your API is down and your app doesn't work anymore, right?
Yeah,
does it crash hard?
It's gonna throw up on me, right?
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so there's a few things there is some things you could do just within the tooling that we have today that would help this, but not everything that we're going to talk about. So you could set multiple startup projects in Visual Studio, which would help with debugging both.
That's a popular thing in mobile.
Yeah.
Android and iOS,
that
and
makes
it's a huge pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
But let's talk about what Aspire can do. So the first thing I think we should do here is what that you can do here is just right click on the Blazor project and you can add Aspire support in here. And so
Orchestrator?
Yeah, add a support. Yeah, exactly. So you can do that to any kind of .NET 8 project. And what this does is if you don't have the Aspire orchestrator, it creates it and it puts it in your machine. It looks like you've done this before, probably.
Yeah.
And
Oh
therefore
yeah.
the
let me
project
delete
exists.
it.
And it creates the project and it adds it to your solution. Then it edits the code inside that project to reference the project that you right clicked on. That's why it's kind of, people get confused somewhere with this gesture. They're like, why is it on a project and not on a solution? The reason is because it does work on the project, and we're going to take you through that in a second. And then Maddy's going to clean up her previous run through right now by deleting these two folders.
I definitely did not ever run this through before. I would never have done that.
You have absolutely done that. Okay. Add .NET Aspire orchestrator support.
Okay. Magic.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
And so, like you said, it adds two
projects. So, but there's a couple of things that it does here that are interesting. It changes your startup project as well.
So that's
you'll notice. Now. So now it's this app host project. So I want you just to run it first of all, and just see what it does. Right?
I'm always afraid. I just deleted folders. Maybe I'm gonna have to delete bin op. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Okay.
It's building.
So yeah, it's building. Wow. You'll be fine. It's okay.
I know I've done this before.
It's okay.
I'm still afraid.
Yeah. So you run this project. Now what happens when the app host is set as your startup project? It doesn't run, it runs and it starts up this dashboard. And so now with an Aspire application, every time you run your application, you have the app host as the start project and it launches everything else for you. And then it runs this dashboard to give you information about your solution. So if you go to the dashboard, you've now got the Blazor app, but there's no API. And we already know that Maddy's app doesn't handle the fact that the API is not there.
Right.
And so I want you to click the logs for me for a sec. So one of the things that the dashboard does is consolidate all the logs for your application. And so now if you browse to your app, go to the if you go to the click the link back in the previous page, to browse to your so you browse to your Blazor app, and then it's going to break, right?
Yeah.
But if you go and you look at the logs for your breaking application, right now if you scroll up, so you'll notice something in here is see this poly word here. Mm-hmm. This is your app retrying. It's retrying the connection to the API multiple times, thinking that it's probably just a hiccup because there's no way you would have just not started the backend API, right?
Yeah, no, never.
Yeah. And you also didn't actually put logic to retry your API calls in your app, right?
No.
Yeah. And so this is part of what happens when you add Aspire, just by kind of Aspirifying your app. One of the things we do is give you resiliency policies built into your app. This is an example of it where the Blazor app is now retrying connections to the back end before it succeeds or fails in this case because you don't have an API.
Right.
So where it does that is if you look at the program CS in the Blazor app.
In the Blazor app.
Yeah.
Sidebar. Horizontal tabs on the left, grouped by project.
Yeah.
Lifesaver.
Still not sure, but
hit the settings.
Yet to be convinced, but yeah. So here we have this add service defaults method. So that gets added to any project that you right click on and say add Aspire to, or you can go do it.
Right.
And that method comes from the other project that was created that wasn't the app host. So if you F12 on this to go look at what the code is, or you go to one of the others. Yeah. So in here is where we turn on telemetry, we create health checks, we give you the resiliency handlers, we do a lot of work for you that all of the projects that are part of your solution should kind of depend upon. When you add orchestration support, it automatically calls this line. You can also just go and add this line to any projects that exist in your project. You don't have to use a tooling gesture. It's literally just this method call. And there's some interesting stuff in here that we'll talk about later. It's code because we expect you might want to tweak some of the things in here, and we wanted to give it to you as code rather than try and put it in a package because of the types of things it does. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But what you now have seen is when you just make it a project part of Aspire and you run it, you've now got some of this resiliency stuff built in because that's one of our opinions is you should have resiliency. You've got telemetry and you've got a dashboard. You can see logs, you can see metrics, you can see information about your app by default with no actual changes to your code yet.
Yeah.
So now if we go to the API and we do the same thing, we right click on the API and we say add Aspire orchestration support.
Did I click on the right thing?
Probably not.
Click, add.
Hmm.
Hold on. Let me. Oh wait, hold on. Let me close this. I can reload this.
What are you doing here?
Add.
Yeah, add. Yeah, you don't see the thing?
No, but I know we can do this by hand.
Yeah, so let's go do it
as well.
So if you, I don't know what's happened to your like Visual Studio here, but like, so you can right click and add again, or you can do it by hand. So we'll show you the do by hand here.
Okay.
If you go to app post.
So if I was in VS Code, this is how I'd have to do this, right?
Yeah, if you're in VS Code, you would probably need to do this. Okay. So firstly, you would need to add a reference to your app host to the API project.
Okay. So here I just need to add project reference.
Yep.
You can do that in the CS proj.
Yeah.
Check that off.
CS proj, right?
So that's something that it did automatically.
It did automatically as well. It's a good thing that happened actually, because I forgot to tell you that earlier, is that also it added a project reference.
Wow.
Right?
Unplanned. Good
yeah. And so what that does, that project reference, is see this type here where it's projects.plants lady aspire blazor.
Mm-hmm.
That type gets generated for you as part because of that project reference.
Oh, okay. So I can do the same thing here.
Now exactly the same thing, but for your API, and it'll have projects.
Don't want to be tight. Sanderson, look away.
Now you've got an API, see? So that's what adding that reference does. Okay. And now you give it a name.
I guess we'll just do plant lady.
Yeah. And like we also generated the name for you, obviously, before. But,
right. That's nice.
Okay. So now with just this, the reason it wasn't working is you still got it running. Can you learn to stop projects?
No,
Please,
because I hot reload
for the love
everything.
of God.
As a proud Maui hot reloader, as someone who has cried over hot reload no less than 400 times in my life.
Start pressing Control F5 then, and not F5 every time. But it's okay.
Okay, yeah.
So
now
the reason you wouldn't see the gesture in Visual Studio is because it was still running. But that's fine because we showed you the manual stuff. And now in here you do builder dot add default services. You also need a reference to the shared project and this project in order to get that method.
Okay. So, you think IntelliSense will be smart enough to pull it in for me? Probably not.
Like control dotting your way to glory.
Oh!
Look at that. Nice. Okay, so now you've got service defaults in the API project. You've got your app host. So now if you run the project, the API is Aspirified, and you will have the API running, and you'll have the Blazor app running.
Okay.
It still won't work.
Because, I hard-coded my port.
Right, but it's not going to be the same port as the one that you hard-coded.
That's probably a good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
But now you've got both. So if you click the Swagger, you'll be able to execute your API. You can see logs for your API. Everything is running, right? Okay. And so if we go back now into Visual Studio, so here's your Swagger. You've got your API, right? Yep. Awesome. And so if we go back to Visual Studio now, in your app host, and let's do the last part. This is the other bit that touches an existing app, which is how you change your Blazor app to talk to the API once it's in Aspire.
Okay.
So here I want you to say var like API or something equals and do that. Yeah. And then on the Blazor app add project reference, we actually at the end here go dot add, dot with, sorry, you're right, with, and then you give it the API. And so this tells Aspire that you have a dependency here, like the Blazor app uses the API. What that does is create config that we'll show you in the dashboard in a minute that gives the Blazor app the URL.
Okay.
With the port. And then in your Blazor code, if you go to your Blazor app where you are registering your HTTP client, so here, instead of saying localhost 5051, you just use the name of the service that you put in the app host. So that string that you typed.
This one?
Yeah, that thing.
API?
Yeah, whatever you typed in that field when you were doing it, you put that here. And now, whenever this Blazor app tries to do a HTTP request, what happens in that service defaults method, a HTTP handler is added, which looks at the name for the request and then tries to resolve it against a service discovery system that's added as part of Aspire.
Right.
It's kind of pluggable and such, but in your local dev flow, so they can be resolved many ways in production and such. Here, this is done via basically environment variables and configuration.
Ooh.
So if you click details on the right-hand side of the Blazor app, and you scroll down, what you'll see is, if you can do, and then you scroll down here, what you'll see is these are all environment variables that are set on this project when we launched it. And you see this bottom one here, services, plant, lady goes, Aspire, and you've got both a HTTPS and a HTTP port. We didn't even talk about the fact that you've also got that somewhere along the line.
For free? That just That's cool.
And so now you've got a port and a URL, and Blazor, your Blazor app knows how to grab that and fill in the spot for you, so that when you go to Blazor, now your Blazor app is working. Look at that.
Oh, that's
so now
cool.
You're back to where you were, but it's F5able.
Yeah, and it also has resiliency.
So it's F5able. It has resiliency built in. It has health checks and health.
Stuff.
It has health probes built in, and something else. If you click traces, yeah, click this trace button. See that? See the line here with the yellow bit.
Mm-hmm.
So what the distributed trace view does, it shows you like things that happened in your app. So in here, you can see Maddy a couple of times going to the application and doing a thing that caused Blazor to go talk to the API and then turn back. So you can see all of the things that are happening across your distributed app. If you had a database, you'd be able to see the database call here.
Ooh.
And if you're using like an ORM that logged the SQL, then you would be able to see literally the SQL that was causing that that span to be the time that it was. So you could easily see, trivially see things like too many database calls happening, maybe a bad query causing a really long database call, and just at a glance, you can see those things in that view.
Yeah, this is nice because I usually do it here in the dev tools where you refresh the page and then you just kind of have to click around.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
These are really small and you can kind of get it done, but it's not.
You can see some similar information in here. Yeah, absolutely.
But I find this personally it's also filterable.
Yep.
You can go
it also
to
you can connect
everything.
Yeah, you can connect straight to the logical logs for that distributed view. Yeah, it's a super powerful, super nice view for distributed apps, and it's very, very important for when you've got multi-part apps, because it just makes, when you've got two different processes running with their own log streams, finding out what happened and correlating like this one log over here with this at the same time as this one over here is a really non-trivial kind of task. Except that now it is trivial because you've got the OpenTelemetry standard. And all of this is done via OTel. So it's all an open standard. We just support it deeply in .NET as a platform, and then we surface it here in the dashboard, and we make sure that we turn it on in those service default methods for you.
So OpenTelemetry.
OpenTelemetry. Okay. That's what gives you all this data for all of this stuff, yeah.
So there is a talk later today by Harriet New Relic, I believe.
Yeah.
Who they're going to dive into more of
a lot of this stuff, as well as giving you options for production usage. So the thing about this dashboard is dev time. It's designed for you as a developer sitting at a keyboard trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah, it's designed for that. It's optimized. Most of Aspire is optimized for developers first, right? It's designed for you to be as productive as you can figuring out what's going on. Your requirements for your production, your production system for monitoring and logging and all of those sorts of things are kind of different. They're not completely separate. They're kind of overlapping, but they're not the same. And so this is optimized for you in dev, not prod. You still need a New Relic or an App Insights or a data or something for your production like diagnostic systems. And you can kind of host this in prod if you want, but we don't by default. You have to choose to do that. It's a circular buffer. It doesn't persist anything anywhere for starters, is why it's kind of not suitable for that.
If I get a lot of stuff, it's just
going to start throwing away the oldest things, and then and that's fine when you're trying to diagnose what's going on, because that's what it's for. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we have now done we've got the HTTPS working. We've got this working on one click.
Yeah.
I can see what's going on between them.
Yeah. It's got resiliency.
Next.
Well, it's got retries. Well, it's got a several patterns as well as retries.
It is more resilient
than it was before.
10 minutes ago.
Indeed. Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing for me is probably where this part I can usually get to myself, right? Yeah. Without Aspire.
I also see a good point in the chat here, which says that that view, that distributed trace view we said, is probably one of the first places you'll start to find and do your optimization tuning, because you'll see patterns for profiling stuff, because it just becomes easy to start to see patterns.
Yeah.
And then you can know how to dig in. You can know how to get into Visual Studio and use Visual Studio's deeper tools, but based upon now I know which the things is causing the problem. So it can be very, very useful for that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So now this is where I start to usually be like, okay, like I need a database. Hey, Glen, set me up a database and stage it and give me the token, and I will just connect to it via the internet.
You got people for that? That's amazing.
Yeah, you. You're my database guy. That's fair. No, Jerry Nixon. Please help me set up a SQL table for me.
Yeah.
But Aspire, supposedly, makes that way easier.
It does. So I want to also call out here, like this, we wanted to make it so that if you were going to build an app that spins up SQL, in order to help the onboarding, we wanted to make sure it was possible to just say, I want to use a database and have it spin up for you automatically when you run the app. But I also want to call out, because all of our demos show that, people there was some confusion where people were like, do I have to do that? And the answer is no. You can obviously connect to an existing database.
Oh, yeah.
That is also possible.
Good.
You don't have to do the thing that we're about to show you. The other things work. This is the demo all the time because it's the new thing that you can do. It's the new capability, right? There are ways to do all the other things. So, or at least a bunch of the other
Aspire
things.
is very much like an onion you can peel back the layers of.
Indeed.
So as you need to customize things or use existing things and kind of fit them in, Aspire is flexible enough to do that. That's why, like you said, all the extensions are code that you can
I suspect calling it .NET Shrek wouldn't have gone down well, but it does have layers.
Shrek.
Yeah. So let's go to the app host and see what it looks like to add a database here.
Okay.
So firstly, there's this, the first thing is there is hosting packages in Aspire. Okay. They have a naming convention or a format where you have like hosting.blah, aspire.hosting.blah. And if you you can add Aspire packages. And then if you go looking for those, there is
app host, right?
On the app host. Okay. And so the app host, you add hosting packages, and you see here how it's basically that. What that filter did was filter NuGet packages down to ones that match the thing. And so this gives you a list of all the things that you can just add to your app host. And then when you run your app, it'll help, the app host will help spinning up or creating or connecting to those things in some way. So there's one here for like Postgres. Let's grab that. So when you add one of these packages, that gives you APIs in the app host that you can go call. And that's what we're going to do.
Sweet.
And then there's a like companion component that there's a thing called Aspire components, which are kind of a companion to the host. The hosting package is about kind of getting the thing running, getting access to a thing, like standing up a SQL instance. Okay. And the component is about talking to that thing. And we'll talk about the component when it comes time to use this database.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Just so if I have like MadDB, right?
Yeah.
That's my database.
Your own.
My own database protocol.
Is that like the database you created?
Yeah.
Like you're going to create your own database?
Postgres. It's actually Postgres' biggest competitor.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
So Postgres is going to be, okay. MadDB. All right.
How do I
and you
get
want
that
to think,
into an app host?
So what these are is, so at the moment, all of the hosting packages and such are all in our repo. So you could do a PR to us and say, here's a package.
Sweet.
And but here's the code. But you can also just ship your own, like to say, here is an Aspire component, Aspire thing for my thing. What it looks like is the app, there's a talk later today by Mitch. He talks about kind of extending the app host, where he would probably, I assume, talk about a bunch of this. But what you do is you just need to create a few C# classes that describe to us how to run your thing. Ooh. So if it's a Docker image, that's really easy because we have like a Docker base type. You can just say mine is a Docker resource and here's the image name and here's some args and stuff to run. And that's very trivial. It's effectively one class with a few lines. If it's a little bit more custom, it might be a bit more involved. Yeah. But you ultimately create a NuGet package with a few classes that tells us how to run the thing is what you need to have a hosting package to run to boot your thing.
Cool.
They don't have to be containers. We have a couple of primitive types. One of them is exe though, like binary. So you can just execute anything.
Wow.
So built into the first version of Aspire was JavaScript support, which we're going to show we'll show that again later, the JavaScript support that we've had from the beginning. Yeah. That is ultimately an exe. It shells out to whatever, to the node or NPM or whatever the right thing is to run the JavaScript, right?
Okay. So I imagine I just do the
VarDB,
same thing, right?
Yep, VarDB equals builder dot, and you should have now a new add Postgres. Yeah, there it was, add Postgres method. And here, okay, then thanks, no, just add Postgres. Oh. That's
sorry, Copilot.
Copilot being hallucinating.
Doing your best, sweetie.
It created a cool name for you though that was consistent. You also don't want a network.
No, I don't know what that is. I just tabbed and it came up quick. Anyways, the name is great. Cool.
Yep. So there's a couple of things you can do here. One is one of the things is if you want the database that the Aspire, that host that you just created to be like a specific name, you can set an environment variable.
Okay. So with environment.
Yeah, with environment. This is how you set an environment variable on the thing that you're about to launch. I think it's Postgres_DB, I think is the name of this environment variable. Okay. And this tells Postgres, this is a thing Postgres understands that tells Postgres, like, when you start up the database, the default database is going to be called plants, right? And that with 3 Z's, the appropriate amount of Z's.
Correct.
And so this is how you set environment variables, whatever you want. You could grab that from config in here, like you could load it from Aspire's config and have it flow through.
Wow.
You could put it in user secrets in the app host and then pull it out and put it in here, and then it becomes an environment variable.
Ooh.
There's a bunch of stuff like that you could play around with in here by just setting kind of stuff in here.
I think Jeremy's going to talk about user secrets.
Cool.
Like
Yeah.
right?
Then we should, Jeremy's talk about key cloak. That wouldn't surprise me.
Key cloak.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. All right. What else should I add here? Should I just semicolon it? Call it a day.
Semicolon it and see what you got. Or
You want
to do add database?
I want to do admin.
Oh, right. Sorry, I completely forgot. This is where the illusion that Maddy doesn't know what she's talking about completely falls apart. Because she absolutely built this app and I helped her for like the last day doing all this stuff beforehand. Yeah. With PG admin. So what with PG admin does, the add Postgres adds the Postgres Docker image. PG admin adds the web admin interface for Postgres and spins it up beside that database and makes it so they can talk. So you can just click a URL and then it opens up the database and you can like edit it. You can create tables and so on and so forth.
And so this is all part of the Postgres specific package. But if you wanted to use the SQL Server one or MongoDB, Luce is going to talk about Mongo today. All of those things have similar. The environment would be the same for everything, right? But they'd have their own kind of, if they need an admin to extend, right? It's extending the app host.
Yeah.
And then I imagine if it doesn't have a web-based UI, you could connect to it.
Yeah, you can get the connection string. So we can show where the connection string appears in a moment. Once you do the same thing we did for the API, where you do the with reference, then an environment variable will be created with the connection string to connect to this instance.
Cool.
And you could always grab that and go plug it in wherever you see fit.
I think I probably missed a variable. This is where I might have to pull up the snippets. I'm so sorry. Mm-hmm. The illusion falls apart because it's not giving me a endpoint.
It's still starting. Did you forget?
That's probably true.
I think the only thing you didn't do was add database, which shouldn't break that bit. But yeah, go look at your snippet.
Let's see. No, it's good.
Yeah, and you just didn't do add database, which should not impact that. I think you might just be really slow because you're both streaming and running your thing. So let's stop that and let's.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's just slow, so slow that you thought it failed. Yeah.
It's not my fault.
Okay, so this gives you now an add database, an admin.
Okay.
I guess you could click the admin interface if you want.
Yeah, I'll see if it spins up. Might take a few minutes.
Oh, you could, yeah.
But so if I click in I don't know, details of these, I get environment variables again?
You get environment variables again, yeah. So let's go back to your app again.
Okay.
Let's just do finish this code snippet out that you had, which was like var db equals add db. Yeah, and then you add a with to that.
Okay. Oh, in my API. So I added this.
Yeah.
And then
you called it DB server
so
without an underscore. You called it DB host in your snippet. So you need to fix that.
Nice.
And then in your API, you just do .with.
Yep.
You give it the reference and and then you'll see exactly this pattern. No, DB.
Oh, DB.
You could do that, but since we did do add database, you'll see this pattern in a bunch of our samples and things like that. It's all fairly similar. So now if you run your application, that's right. Oh, good catch. Yeah, you changed the name. The right amount of Z's. So now when you run, we would have caught that anyway because of the demo coming up.
Yeah, probably would have thrown up on me.
Well, it's a health check.
Oh,
yeah.
Fancy.
So now if you, I guess, kick off the PG admin and see if see how because your machine is really struggling.
And then you can tell, this is actually probably a good thing screen. A good thing to call out is I have Docker running on my machine.
Yeah.
And so what it did, because I ran it for the first time, I just added that package
to this
app.
It downloaded the image.
Yeah, it downloaded the Postgres image. It spun it up in Docker. So if I go into Docker, I'm afraid to click on it because my Docker has been so flaky.
But you'll see all the containers running. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's nice.
Yep. And then if you now go to the API and you look at details of the API.
Okay, let's reset. That's good. Oh, sorry, details of the API.
Yep, that one. Yep. And you just scroll down in your environment variables here. You're going to find somewhere in here the connection string to that database.
Plants.
Yeah, look at that. And so here is your connection string. And you don't have passwords. You don't have connection strings. You don't have a server name. You don't have all of that information baked into your app, hard-coded in config files, is
Right.
generated on the fly as your application boots.
Okay.
And so now you don't have, when we talked about onboarding, you don't have the like go install SQL Server, go like make it, bind it to some wrong port when you were setting up the thing. So now your connection string is different to everybody else's connection string. You don't have like kind of just, those things aren't hard to solve when you find them, but they just slow lots of things down. They just kind of gum
And
up
you
the
can't
works.
like push it to source control. So with
Yeah.
Aspire, like since it's all kind of on the fly.
Yeah.
Like it's picking up the port that Aspire chose on my machine today, right now when I ran
absolutely. And so there's some benefits to this sort of stuff being kind of ephemeral in the dev environment, in your dev environment. Yeah, ephemeral.
So fancy.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how, but that's also how you could grab one of the ways you could grab a connection string if you wanted to connect to it in some other admin tool or something like that, for example. So now if you click the API URL, we'll show you one other thing. One of the things that gets added here is health as an endpoint to your API. Yeah. Or health.
Trash. Hold on. Did I stop running the app?
Nope. Is it health? Is it health or health?
I think it's health.
Okay.
But you know what we could do? Let's see. Nope.
Yeah. So go back to your thing. Did you just misclick something?
I very much might have.
Click your URL again.
Hold on. Let me do
Make
this.
sure your Swagger comes up. That's
okay. PG admin's up. That's good. Hello.
Nice.
Good morning.
Hello, Swagger.
And then this is hypothetically health.
Health. Yeah. Okay. So we can debug that in a moment.
Oh, I actually think I know what's going on for once.
Oh.
Which would be amazing. So this is the HTTP endpoint I hard coded.
Nope.
Yep. And so it's doing some fancy pantsy redirection. I'm wondering if I have to remove it from here. Do I have to touch that, do you think?
No.
Okay. Never mind.
Okay. So we showed PG admin.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing that I want to show you here is go back to go into your app. I guess stop your app.
Yep.
Then run it again. Stop your app and then go to extensions into your service defaults.
Okay. Right here.
And so the code that we're looking for here is if you scroll down, there is a if here map to default endpoints. Oh, okay. So I do know why this is, but let's continue.
Okay.
So app.environment.isDevelopment, and we map this health check /health, right?
Right.
But there is a problem.
Oh.
You didn't tell the API how to talk to the database, so there is no health checks. So if you go, go to the API now, you need to add the package we talked about earlier, which is the component to be able to talk, the component for Postgres, the Aspire component. So right click, add NuGet package, add the Aspire component for Postgres.
Okay, so I can do that on here.
Yeah. So you'll notice here, because it's not the app host, you've got a different set of packages. They don't have hosting in them. The distinction here is the hosting packages are about spinning up the resource, and these packages are about communicating with, like, talking to that resource. And so what these are glue packages. The thing you're going to get here is the MPG SQL like provider, same as if you were to use MPG SQL in any other way. It's not hiding it. It's not some new library to talk to the database. What it does is adds it to DI, adds a health check for the database. It sets up resiliency. It makes sure the logs for the SDK go to the right place. It just configures the thing to work in the way that you want to do it. Don't believe it's got data source at the end.
Oh my goodness. This is the flaws of
So go press dot after builder and just do what IntelliSense tells you to do instead of trying to rely on.
That's it.
Okay, then yeah.
I was right. I think it just wanted.
It wants a name. Oh, it wants the name. Yeah.
Some my DB or my DB server.
Yeah, the name that you gave it in its plans.
Oh, that. Okay.
Yeah, because that's what you added the reference
source.
to.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really shouldn't have done so many Z's because now I'm going to keep forgetting how many Z's.
Classic problem.
Yeah. Three Z's.
Which you said was the correct amount of Z's.
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
So now you've added this MPG SQL source. So now you could resolve, for example, an MPG SQL connection from DI, and it would be all configured to talk to this database and have everything set up.
So I could like do a map here.
You could do a map here. You could do the thing. And also you should, now your health endpoint should work. So you can go try and help
so what if
your
I did
endpoint.
like get DB? where I could just DI
you can accept MPG
SQL
connection, and then you could do some stuff. If you were going to go, you could add the EF in here. You could do Dapper, the ORM, or you could do like whatever you want to that connection in order to be able to talk to that database.
So this just now knows because I put this one line in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
So
run it
now you
again.
can go
Let's
do
see
that.
if the health check actually works.
Yeah, and so now you should get a health check, and the health check will do basically a select one against the database, and it'll prove that the API can talk to that database or not.
Wow. All right, let's take a look.
Yeah.
And so so the health checks and the Swagger endpoints, FYI, we by default, because we made the right decision, only expose those to you in development.
Right.
Those are potential security concerns to like leave a health endpoint open.
Yeah. So if you were paying attention when you saw that code we showed earlier that had the health endpoint in it, it had his if is development around it.
Right. Which is a really easy thing to do in .NET, fortunately. So if I do health now.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh no. Still broken.
What did I break this time?
I don't know what you broke this time on your machine.
There's always something.
But your machine has been a never-ending delight of weird breaks that aren't reproducible.
Do I need to like dot this? You think?
No.
I don't know.
I don't know. What does a snippet say?
Let me look at my snippets. Thank you. Nope, that's it.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep.
But that shouldn't impact your ad health checks. So I'm not 100% sure what we did wrong in this instance.
Maybe it's
and we'll have to play around with it a bit in the future to figure it out.
It's a good one. There's no way that's gonna work, right?
Okay.
All right.
So normally, unfortunately for that demo failure, I apologize. But there are health checks being added to talk to do the MPG SQL, and I have like 10 minutes left of this video, so we don't have enough time to debug it like we normally would want to try and figure it out for you, which is super unfortunate. People like to see us fail and then figure it out, and unfortunately, we're not going to have a chance to figure it out this time. This map health check here is happening to your application. Something is happening that is making this not map, like you're not in development, or if something is going on, we're in that front, or you didn't call the ad service defaults in the right place, or something like that is happening because we did that manually. So
that's also totally possible.
And then something like that is happening to break your health checks. But the point is that when you're doing this at home and you're playing around with this, you've got yourself a health check system now. It is only going to work in development though, so you need to do work anyway to decide how you're going to turn on those health checks in your production system, and then you also need to decide how you're going to monitor them. Because they're only useful if something is actually checking that the things are returning healthy.
Well, yeah, like this doesn't have a health check by default,
no.
Right? So I would need to extend it.
Right.
Or hypothetically, we just don't know. But I could extend it to be whatever I say a health check is, whatever healthy means, right?
Yeah. So yes, you can extend health checks to do that. That's kind of the way the system works. Yeah. Okay. Go to your app host for a sec for me. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that's how that setup was.
Sweet.
And then I think we were going to switch, right?
Well, one thing we're not going to talk about right now.
Deployments.
So
okay, that's why. Yeah, because that's why we're running out of time.
Yeah. So deployment is a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
As many of you know.
Yeah.
And so with Aspire, it's very flexible. And so what we've heard a few times already is, well, I can't use Aspire for deployment. We have a deployment system and we're not touching it, so I can't use Aspire. Not true. You could use Aspire just for the local development stuff, just like that, and not touch your deployment at all. So how you do it today is totally an option. Yeah. But what you will see later today when Brady and I do some demo. Well, Brady does the demo, luckily, because
your machine's not demoing today very well.
Absolutely not.
Yep.
There's a bunch of other options.
Indeed. Yeah, you can deploy kind of using whatever the tech you use today is, but the demo that you will see all the time with Aspire uses a thing called the Azure Developer CLI, AZD, when deploying to Azure, or the others for the others clouds. Yeah. The thing that AZD gives you is effectively an easy button. Like it's a one .azd init, azd up, and it's just running in the cloud. All of your things are running in Azure Container Apps, and you can go hit it. It's like the easiest, fastest way I've ever seen to take a multi-part application and have it stood up in the cloud and accessible, right? Okay. But and you can use that, and it's absolutely fine. Use it in production, use it in development, do what you want to do with it. It's designed for all those use cases. It's designed to help developers get stuff into the cloud fast. But most people have some form of deployment system already. And that's the point that you're making, is you can also just integrate Aspire. Because each of those, that Blazor app and that API app, they're just a Blazor app and an API app.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about them from kind of a runtime standpoint any more than any other Blazor app or API app. You can containerize them the same way as you would elsewhere. They'll run in any place where Blazor or APIs can run, and you can deploy them using whatever tech you use today.
So does that mean I could add the SQL component to my API even if I wasn't?
Yeah, if you wanted to.
Aspire?
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, because it's just doing kind of standard .NET stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's making it easy. It's gluing it.
Yeah. And so the other thing is the AZD lets you do is InfraSynth. So if you like, this video is going to show you Visual Studio. So the other thing we have is the same experience where you can just kind of one click in Visual Studio to get it to the cloud. Yep. Again, this is the like super smooth, easy button, right? Yep. The other thing that AZD can give you on the command line is it can generate all the things it would have used. So if you're like, oh, AZD is cool, but I would like to kind of take ownership of this now and then like customize it more myself, or like manually do stuff with Bicep or Terraform or whatever, AZD can generate that for you. And then you can go from there if you would like to do that.
That's really nice.
So that's another thing that it can do.
And this is, we have not written a lick of YAML or Bicep or anything.
That is true.
And so like this hypothetically, I could right click publish this if I wanted to. I'm just not going to, because I don't have any of my Azure stuff hooked up to this machine.
We also have 0 time.
We have like 8 or 9 whole minutes, which is great because I have the coolest demo.
Yeah.
That is also incredibly dicey, but it's on my Mac. So we're going to flip over here.
Yep.
I'm going to slide this over. And so one thing that's awesome about Aspire, besides the fact that it is .NET, is that you can really use it for anything. Like you said, like it's just an executable. You can add a hosting package for anything.
Yeah.
And so what I have here is I've been working on a fantasy football app to summarize how bad my team was last year, basically. Ideally for this year, I can talk about how good I am, but we'll see. And so I wrote a Python app because I found this like very easy ESPN API, just like abstraction.
Okay. Yep.
And the one that I don't like JavaScript. I get very scared by it. And then I couldn't find it in any other language. So I was like, well, I'm going to use this one, the Python version, set this up. And then what I wanted to do basically was just plot with all this matplotlib wizardry that I Googled my way through and fake co-piloted my way through. Just plot kind of my scores throughout the year based on the week, right? So this is just a single Python file. And then what I'm doing is I'm serving this at the chart endpoint as an image, right? So I'm serving it down here.
So you've made a Python API to wrap this code, because you found a very trivial piece of Python code, and you just wanted to use it instead of trying to rewrite it in C# or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like reverse engineer ESPN v3. Thank you.
Or you might have a world where there's some library that exists in Python that you don't have a version of in other languages or whatever.
Right, exactly. Right, and because I love to torture myself, I was like, I will serve this with a React front end.
Sometimes we see this with heavy AI stuff too, right? Like the AI researcher does stuff in Python, and rather than try sometimes, and therefore you just wrap that Python and then consume it in the rest of your app language rather than trying to rewrite it.
And so, I just have a, app.typescript, right? I used Vite, which is apparently like the cool kids' new Create React app. JavaScript people, I'm trying to learn more about what you actually do.
Yeah.
So please let me know. And I just, hit that endpoint to get the image because it's just returning the actual bits. And I serve it down here. So to add an Aspire project.
This is a really complicated HTML page.
Yes.
With with one variable in it.
Correct.
And it's the most complicated way possible of doing that.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yep. My goal was at one point to like make this real, but then I wrote JavaScript again, and I was like, I need to go back.
And then you switched to Blazor. Okay.
So what I did here, because I'm in VS Code, so for those of you who aren't in Visual Studio, totally fine. Command line works great. There's also the new project helper in VS Code. I just added an app host. I didn't even add the service defaults because I'm not doing .NET. So I didn't feel like I needed to like add that extra project in.
Yeah.
And so I can either .NET Run or I can run it through Visual Studio Code. I just usually do .NET Run because I'm a command line person. And in my app host, I'm going to get this started.
I also feel obliged to say I don't hate JavaScript, just for everybody out there.
Yeah, you really know your way around it more than I want, and that makes me sad.
I like all things. I'm just a nerd. Universal nerd.
I like a lot of things. I tangentially, I don't understand how it doesn't go in order of the lines, but that's okay. Whatever. Love Python though. Yeah, anyways, so what I did was I used this new app host extension point add Python project.
So this add Python method is brand new. It actually shipped today. Because today we shipped a new version of Aspire 8.1,
so you can see.
Which we'll have a slide up with some of the features and stuff for that in a minute. It was basically just a patch release with a lot of feature requests and community engagement and stuff that happened post 8 and before now.
Yeah.
This was contributed by a community member who wanted Python.
Yeah,
so
it was awesome.
Yeah, it was really good.
And then same thing with Node. I said this earlier. We've had this forever, right?
Yeah, we've had JavaScript for a while.
And so I'm just giving it a name for the dashboard.
Yeah.
I'm pointing to where it is, where the actual executable is or whatever it is. In the Python one, I'm telling it the entry point. And I'm giving it a couple of things to set up my environment variables and all that.
Right.
For the Node one, I just tell it what the NPM. I did this as an NPM app, and so I just gave it the NPM command, which in this case is npm dev.
Nice, and then you can run it.
And so if I command click on the dashboard down here,
right,
okay.
You've got a dashboard running Node and Python.
Yeah, and then I have the same stuff. I could do a bunch of things also to configure OpenTelemetry. So I believe our Node stuff currently has it in by default. So you'll see it down.
Yeah. We don't have anything that tells you we don't do anything to force the Node app to emit OpenTelemetry, but that does exist in the Node ecosystem.
Right.
But we set all the data up so that should you decide to turn that on in your app, you get it. And you should, if you're doing this, like turn on OTel. But unlike
and then I could go and do that work to make it work in Python too if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But now when I open this, first of all,
look at that
CSS.
Oh, fancy! Hover effects.
It's
nice.
just a V template.
Yeah, nice. Oh, I see.
I copy pasted it and changed the colors. Yeah. But also, this is my matplotlib Python output right here that just served on an endpoint that got stuck in here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So this is JavaScript and Python working together in an Aspire app.
Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And like in reality, where we see this work is, you have a JavaScript front end and a .NET API and a Python script somewhere.
Yeah.
And so all of these things now can play together.
Yeah. A lot of our survey data, we've surveyed you all a lot over the course of various .NET comps and cloud native research and stuff like that. And all of our research said, lots of JavaScript front ends with .NET backends. We need to be able to support that. That's why it was first. Yep. And then some of you are saying, I've also got a few random Python scripts around that I have wrapped in APIs that for various reasons that I want to be able to call, and I'd like to orchestrate that as well.
Yep.
And so the world that we're in is at a minimum polyglot-ish. Right, yes. Like a lot of .NET with a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, is it truly polyglot? I don't know, but like there is at least more than just .NET in many of your solutions out there.
Right.
So we wanted to support you all because that's what we do here.
And so, Jeff, in the background, if you want to flip back, we have like 2 more slides, and then we'll kick you off for the rest of the day. Thank you, of course, to the team, DevRel Studios, and our .NET community team, who have just like kind of put this together.
This whole event,
of their own accord.
Yeah,
there was no like budget or anything. It was just kind of like, hey, we want to do a day on Aspire. Let's do it. Yeah. And so we're doing it.
Yeah, indeed.
And so this is great timing because it is coinciding with the release of .NET Aspire 8.1.
Yeah,
you can. Update
grab it right now.
.NET workload update.
Yep, there's a blog post about it. And then here's some of the features, right? So Docker file support. So you can just say with this Docker file and just give a Docker file to a service, and that'll become a service in your Aspire solution.
Nice.
There were some bugs that improved local database. Was basically just a bug that we had it was just a really bad experience where the password for the database would change every time, and that would cause a whole bunch of edges, which we fixed. We've made a lot of improvement on. We added a lot of components. So this bottom list are all things now that you can just grab a package for and say .add in the app host that you couldn't do before. And there's just a whole bunch. There's a big slew of just bug fixes and minor things and pain fixes and stuff that we've done over the last 2 months, is it?
Yeah.
2 months.
And we're going to try and release, right, like roughly monthly.
Yeah.
Just to push out fixes and whatever paper cuts and things. But,
yeah.
you know, we also are kind of on the same heartbeat as .NET, if you will.
Yeah.
So you can expect .NET 9 is going to be a rev in the big number here.
Yep.
And maybe some larger things. But, you know, you can expect these kind of small updates, minor version updates for Aspire regularly throughout the year.
Yeah.
So you don't have to wait for a .NET version to rev. And what's great about this release in particular, and I've started to see the things coming in for 8.2 that we're looking at, which I'm like, we barely shipped 8.1. Do not talk to me about 8.2. But the Python project, like Glen said, came in from @wmites. And I think Elasticsearch and also a way to do environment variable stuff in the app host came in from Alirexa.
Nice.
And thank you both for contributing. For the folks that, you know, are in the chat and everything who have been on the GitHub, it's pretty active. It's pretty fun in there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the team is always in there looking at issue requests. And,
the Discord, if you want to participate and talk to the people, I jump on GitHub, jump on the Discord, like talk to people. We're there.
Yeah. And we're super, you know, open to all of this. Of course, your feedback. If you haven't even touched Aspire yet, if this is your first exposure to it, or if you kind of want a more formal training than just me and Glenn hanging out and poking around, we do have a whole collection of learn modules, all of that. They have also been doing these live streams. I know Jeff Fretz did one that's like Aspire, let's learn .NET Aspire. You're rushing me. It's okay.
I am.
I know.
It's 5. It's the end.
2 slides.
It's the end. Slides. Sanderson is waiting to tell everybody about AI right now.
You can get a book.
Yeah.
It's
you can.
happily some off.
This is
There's
actually
also a discount.
This is very cool. Like, even though we've only just begun, Christian was writing a book about kind of microservices, and as soon as he started to see that we were working with Aspire, he immediately started kind of redoing his thing. I believe is the way this happened. It's why it's like here so quick. And it's very cool.
And then of course, because we're the .NET team, we're going to ask you to fill out a survey. This is for the event. Let us know if you like events like this. You know, and there's a couple of Aspire questions in there. But the other thing I promised the team I'd call out is if you ever see a gold bar or a yellow, it's like we say gold, it's like a light, pale, sickly yellow.
In Visual Studio.
And it says like, hey, we want to hear your feedback, like take a survey. That is actually like something we look at every week.
Come straight to the engineering team to try and figure out how good our thing is doing for you.
And we randomly select like a percentage of people every release. So when you get that to pop up, that is a really good way to fill it out. And we have the option for you to leave your email. And you know, if you have something specific going on that we want to learn more about, we'll reach out and we can talk.
If you will tell us that we're allowed to do that.
Right. And then, of course, you can always open things on the GitHub as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And so now, Sanderson, the one and only, will be here to talk about AI, doing a whole lot of AI stuff in .NET, in a Blazor app, I believe, doing chatbots and showing you how to use LLMs and doing all sorts of great stuff like that. So
sweet. Thanks for having me.
Come and watch that. Yeah, thanks for coming. And thanks to you all.
Yeah.